Hello, everyone. This lecture, we're going to talk about the prompt. The first question is, what are the prompts? So when you launch the ChatGPT, this window will pop up. You can type the input. So that are the prompts. The prompts are the instruction or input given to ChatGPT that guide the model in generating meaningful and appropriate response. However, the quality of the prompt often determines the accuracy of the response. Usually, well-crafted prompts can lead to more precise and desired response. So for example, we can use prompt to ask a question, request for creative content, or even do the programming. So let's show you how we can use the prompt using the ChatGPT. After you log into the ChatGPT, you're gonna able to message ChatGPT. These are the area you can type your prompt. So for example, if I want to ask questions, so I can type the question like, what is the capital of Italy? Then the ChatGPT give me the response. The capital of Italy is Rome. So we also can use ChatGPT to request for creative content. So I can ask ChatGPT write a story about a brief night. So you can see these are the response. Once upon a time in a land of howling. So you can see it generates a short story. So when I type the same prompt again, and they're going to give us a different story. This is called the randomness of the prompt response. In addition to ask a question, creative content, so you can edit and craft the prompt to do many other things. For example, we can even use the prompt to ask ChatGPT do the programming for us. For example, I want to process my input, follow some format. So I give the prompt as process my input in the format of name, job, and location. My name is Jack, and I'm working as a software engineer in New Jersey. So this is the message I want to process, but I want the ChatGPT to do some programming to process my input in a format of name, job, and location. So after I type this prompt, then the ChatGPT are able to, do some programming and process my input, generate the output as in the desired format. And we even can ask ChatGPT to write the code for the software engineering project. So here I type input, please write HTML code for my personal website. So even I have some typo in my prompt, it's not a big deal. The ChatGPT can still generate the HTML code for the personal website. So this is the personal website code. So we can deploy for our website. But before you actually use the code, you're supposed to check the accuracy and the typo for the code. So also ChatGPT give you the instruction, how you're going to use the code for deployment. As we mentioned earlier, there's some randomness in the ChatGPT. So when I type, please write a brief story about the brief night, then the ChatGPT give me different response when I type 2 times. So this is called randomness in the output. So usually when you give a strong prompt pattern, then the output may be more stable. So for example, I give the input as if you are happy, you know it, clap. Then you can see clap, clap, clap. And I type again. If you are happy and you know it, clap. They still generate clap, clap, clap. So this prompt has a strong pattern, which may appear many times in the training data. When we train the ChatGPT model, so once you give a strong pattern in the ChatGPT, these things generate more stable output. Okay, next, we're going to learn some of the prompt patterns, so which will help us to improve the quality of the prompt, so generate the more accurate and more appropriate response. So the first pattern we want to talk about is called persona pattern. So for the persona pattern, in many cases, users may not know what type of the output or details are important for a large language model to focus on achieve a given task. But the user would like large language model to output to always take a certain point of view or perspective. Okay, so and they may know the role or the type of the person that would like ask to get help with. So the persona pattern enable the users to express what they need help without knowing exactly detail of the output they need. So the intent of this pattern is to give the LLM a persona that helps it select what type of output to generate and what details to focus on. Okay, so if we want to use the persona pattern, and our prompt should make the following fundamental statement. Usually we write the format as act as persona X and perform task Y. So here's example. Act as computer scientist. Please briefly explain how ChatGPT was made. So this kind of the pattern will tell the ChatGPT a specific type of the role that it helps to select what type of the output to generate and what type of the details to focus on. Okay, because to explain how ChatGPT was made to a computer scientist should be different with explained to a high school student. Okay, so let's type this kind of the prompt to the ChatGPT to see what kind of the prompt and response we could have. Okay, so we type the prompt as we just mentioned, act as a computer scientist. Briefly explain how ChatGPT was made. So ChatGPT was able to generate a response, act as a computer scientist. So you can see the response as ChatGPT was made using a process called deep learning, specifically through a technology called transformer neural network. Here's a high-level breakdown. So you can see transformer neural network and deep learning, these are the concept in the computer science area. So if the person not in the computer science area, they may not be able to understand this concept. So this kind of response was based on the persona rule computer scientists to explain. So this is called the persona pattern. So if you want to explain how the ChatGPT was made to a high school student, then you can write, act as a high school student. Briefly explain how ChatGPT was made. So the persona pattern can not just only to play the role as a person, they can also create it to simulate human-like conversation as a non-human entity, such as Linux terminal or database, or even an animal's perspective. So let's try another prompt. And the pattern is usually like this. So you are going to pretend to be a Linux terminal for a computer. When I type in a command, you are going to output the corresponding text that the Linux terminal would produce. So this time, so we ask the ChatGPT to play a role as a non-human entity, as a Linux terminal. You can see the ChatGPT gives the response, got it? I'm now a Linux terminal. Feel free to type in your command. So when I type pwd, this is show their current path. Then you can see they give the response. Looks like a real Linux terminal. And then when I type ls, that is a list current file and folders. So the ChatGPT also pretend to be a Linux terminal to show the file and the folders and the current path. There's another pattern which is similar to the persona pattern. Well, we also can say it's a more specific type of the persona pattern, which is called audience persona pattern. So use this pattern, you will ask ChatGPT to play the role as an audience. To use the pattern, your prompt should make the following fundamental statement. Explain X to me, assume that I am persona Y. Okay, here's one of the example. Explain large language model to me, assume I have no computer science background. So then the ChatGPT will explain as an audience. So now we type the prompt, follow the audience persona pattern. Briefly explain how ChatGPT was made to me, assume that I have no computer science background. So you can see the ChatGPT will generate a totally different response as we saw earlier. So as a computer scientist, the terminology, a term used in the response are more professional to the computer science discipline, but here we use the audience persona pattern and assume the audience has no computer science background. So you can see their explanation are kind of more general. When they talk about how the ChatGPT was made, the explanation is made by teaching a computer program to understand and generate human language. And here are the simple terms. So there's no computer science terms included in the response. So this is the audience persona pattern. Sometimes when a user is asking a question, it's possible that they are not the expert in that domain and may not know the best way to phrase the question. So for this situation, we can use a pattern called question refinement pattern. So the intent for this pattern is to ensure the large language model always suggests a better or more refined question than the user could ask. So frankly speaking, so instead of a user to ask the question, and we ask the ChatGPT to ask a question in a better way and better phrased it. So in order to apply this pattern, we can follow this prompt. So if I type from now on, whenever I ask a question, suggest a better version of the question to use instead. So if I type this as a prompt to ChatGPT, and then you can see the ChatGPT will give me a response. Got it? And feel free to ask a question, and I will provide you a refined version alongside the answer. So whenever you type a question, and then the ChatGPT will refine the question, which may better as a prompt to get more accurate and a more appropriate response. Then I type, should I go to Stockton University? So this is my question. Well, this not be well-phrased question because whether you go to Stockton or not may depend on many different factors. So you can see the ChatGPT refined my question. Instead, the question was phrased as, what factors should I consider when deciding whether Stockton is the right choice for me? They also ask, would you like to dive into more specific aspect of Stockton University to help with your decision? So you can see this is a refined question comparing to my original question. So this is the question refinement pattern. Large language model, that is the model ChatGPT adopted. So the large language model often reason better if a question is subdivided into additional questions that provide answers combined together into their original question. So The intent of this pattern is to force the large language model, that is ChatGPT, to always subdivide question into a set of the sub-question that could be used to better answer the original question. So which is called cognitive verifier pattern. So we can use the following format to apply this pattern. So you can type in the ChatGPT as when you ask a question. Follow these rules, generate a number of additional questions that would help you more accurately answer the question, combine the answers to the individual question to produce the final answer to the overall question. So generally speaking, you ask ChatGPT to divide your original question to a number of the sub-questions and then combine the answer together as the overall answer, which usually generate a better result. So here's the example. So I typed the statement as mentioned earlier. And then I got a response from the ChatGPT. Got it? I will follow this approach. When answer your questions from now on, feel free to ask whenever you're ready. So then I ask question, how many trees could be planted in my front yard? Well, to answer this question, we may need to know the type of the trees and the yard size. So by following the cognitive verifier pattern, the ChatGPT was able to divide this question to a few sub-questions. So they asked me to answer the following question. The first one, what are the dimensions of your front yard? The size of your front yard, type of the tree, any existing structure which might affect the tree placement, any other rules, and how much space. So these are all the reasonable questions. Without knowing these details, we probably will not be able to decide how many trees can be planted. So after I provide my response to the question, and then the ChatGPT was able to do some calculation and get the result. Recommendation is approximately 6 trees can fit in my yard. So this is the cognitive verifier pattern by dividing original question into some sub-questions and then combine the answer to the sub-questions to generate the overall answer to the original question. The next pattern I'm going to talk about is the flipped interaction pattern. So sometimes you want the large language model to ask a question. To obtain information, they need to perform some task. So as a user, we may not know how much information we need to provide to the ChatGPT. So rather than the user driving the conversation, and we want the large language model to drive the conversation to focus on achieving a specific goal. So to use this pattern, and your prompt should make the following statement like this. I would like you to ask me a question to achieve our goal X and you should ask a question under condition y is met to achieve the goal. So the x is the goal you have to replace in your own text, and y is your condition, and you have to replace y in the statement here. And the following two sentences are optional, such like ask me the questions one at a time, two at a time, or ask me the first question. So these are the optional statement. Okay, so I tried to apply the flipped interaction pattern in the ChatGPT, and I want to have a plan for a trip to New York City for 2 days. So then I apply the flipped interaction pattern. This is what my prompt I type to the ChatGPT. I would like you to ask me a question. Help me plan my trip for 2 days stay in New York City. So ask me a question until you have enough information to plan my trip. Ask me one question at a time. So ask me the first question now. So you can see I just follow the fundamental statement to place X and Y for my task. And then you can see the ChatGPT will start asking me questions to plan for the trip. So the first question the ChatGPT asks is, do you have any specific interest or type of attractions you would like to focus? So I pick up museum and historical site. And then they ask me another question, any particular museum you have in your mind? So I say no. So the ChatGPT keep me asking the questions to gather my information. Right? How many museums you want to visit every day? And would you have any like place to minimize your travel time? You can see where you want to stay in New York City. So these are the questions the ChatGPT ask me after I applying their flipped interaction pattern. So they will keep asking me the question until the ChatGPT gathered enough information to suggest a trip plan. So eventually, the ChatGPT planned a 2 days stay in New York City for me. Well, you can see in the morning, visit Modern Art Museum, and also visit the Fifth Avenue, New York Public Library. You can lunch at an Italian restaurant. So you can see they give me kind of detailed schedule and looks, makes sense. All right. So this is the flipped interaction pattern. Meta language creation pattern. So during a conversation with the large language model, sometimes the user would like to create a prompt through an alternate language, such as textual shorthand notation. So the intent of this pattern is to explain the semantics of this alternative language to the large language model so the user can write future prompt using this new language. So the statement is like this. So when I say X, I mean Y, or I would like to do Y. Here's an example how we can apply meta language creation pattern. So this is my prompt. Plan a trip for me. I will tell you the days I stay in each city, and you provide me the plan. So here is the meta language. New York City, 3 days, 3. DC 2. This I means stay in New York for 3 days and DC for 2 days. So you can see this is the alternative language. This is the X, which is the shorthanded text. But when I say the shorthand text, I mean this is the full explanation. This means what I would like to do. Okay, so after I type this prompt and the ChatGPT response saying, great, please provide city and the number of the days you plan to stay in each city, and I will create information for you. So when I type Chicago 1, Seattle 2, Houston 1, DC 1. So if I type this prompt, then the large language model will be able to understand, I mean, stay in Chicago 1, Seattle for 2 days, Houston for 1 day, and DC for 1 day. So this is because I applied it the meta language creation pattern when I type the prompt at the beginning. So you can see this is output generated by ChatGPT, and they have the plan according to my input. So this is called meta language creation pattern. Alternative approach pattern. So this pattern intend to ensure the large language model can offer different ways of accomplish the task. So the user don't have to stay on the only approach, which they are familiar with. They just give the user a few different options. So in order to use this pattern, your prompt should making the following fundamental statement. Like this. If there are alternative ways to accomplish a task, X, that is your task that I give you, list the best alternate approach. And also you can include several of the following optional statements, such like compare the pros and cons for each approach, and or prompt me for which approach I would like to use. So we also tried this pattern in the ChatGPT. So this is my prompt. In order to apply this approach, this pattern. So I type, whenever I ask you to deploy application to a specific cloud service, if there are alternative service to accomplish the same thing with the same cloud service provider, list the best alternative service, and then compare the pros and cons for each approach with respect to cost, availability, maintenance effort, and include the original way. Then I ask. And then ask me which approach I would like to, proceed with. So you can see I follow the statement which recommended for the alternative approach pattern. So this is my prompt in the ChatGPT. And then the response is, got it? I will follow this approach when you ask about deploy application to specific cloud service. Let me know if anything else you would like to set up. Right, so I give the prompt, give the task, deploy a HTML website on Amazon AWS cloud. So you can see the response will include several different options. The first option, Amazon S3. Second one, EC2. Right. So they also provide pros and cons. And so use this pattern, we can ask the ChatGPT provide alternative approach so we can select the best among them. So this is alternative approach pattern. ChatGPT is not perfect. One of the weaknesses of the large language model, including ChatGPT, they often rapidly generate convincing text, but not correct. So these errors can take a wide range of the forms, including fake statistics to invalid version number, whatever. However, due to the convincing nature of the generated text, most of the people trust ChatGPT and may not perform appropriate due diligence to check the accuracy. So there's a pattern called fact checklist pattern. The intent of this pattern is to ensure the large language model output a list of facts that are present in the output and form an important part of the statement in the output. So then the user can check the list of the fact to validate the accuracy of the output. So in order to apply this pattern, we need to have the prompt follow this statement. Generate a set of facts that contained in the output. The set of facts should be inserted in the specific point of the input output. So you can like list all the facts at the end of the output. The set of facts should be the fundamental fact that could undermine the correctness of the output if anything is incorrect. So, and also we tried this pattern. So this is my input prompt in order to apply the fact checklist pattern. Whenever you output the text, generate a set of facts that are contained in output. The set of facts should be inserted, I put at the end of the output. The set of facts should be fundamental fact that could undermine whatever. So I just copy paste most of the part from the statement and then specify the position, which is at the end of the output. Then the ChatGPT response, got it? From now on, I will generate a set of fundamental facts at the end of each output to highlight key information that could affect the accuracy of the response. So then I give a question to the ChatGPT. Can we swim while having a fever? So you can see ChatGPT give me response, and at the end, they provide a fundamental fact. So I can check this fact, then I can verify the accuracy of the output, because as output, ChatGPT provided that based on this fundamental fact. Okay, So this is a fact checklist pattern. So far, we have expanded and give the demo for several prompt patterns. But actually, there are many more patterns than we just explained it in this lecture. So please refer to the reference and the research publications for more patterns.